Okay, folks, lecture number 11. We're almost halfway through this course. Things are happening very quickly and time is flying by. Last time we were together, we talked about the working class. This was prior to that, the middle class. And the working class, I mentioned to you about skilled workers, unskilled workers. Education is key to everything, my friends. It honestly is. I hope you took the opportunity to look at the video on Jeremy Bentham. That's an interesting video about the head of Jeremy Bentham here. All right, and with Jeremy Bentham, you were introduced to the ideas of utilitarianism. We also mentioned that of Auguste Comte, who was a Frenchman, and you introduced the ideas of positivism, the only knowledge of any current values, that of positive knowledge or scientific knowledge. All right, we also talked about Charles Dickens, not one of my favorite writers, if you will. I've read some of his works here, and I just don't really get into 19th century writers very much. All right, we also talked about the Congress of Vienna. This was a change of a subject here, folks. Congress of Vienna, 1814. You should be familiar also with legitimacy. We talked about liberalism here. You can go back and review through your notes about that. All right, and let's see what else. And some evidence here of liberalism with in Italy itself, with the Carbonari, the charcoal burners, so to speak, here. And we'll talk more about that later. We also talked about the abdication of the French king, Charles X. This took place after the July Revolution of 1830 here, folks. Everybody remember that? Liberty leading the people. All right, that was a famous painting here by Eugène Delacroix. And we also mentioned that of Louis Philippe. Louis Philippe became the next king of France. And in a few minutes here, folks, we're going to end his reign in 1848, but I don't want to let too much of that out to you right now. We'll wait until a more appropriate time. And I think in the closing parts of the class period, we talked about 60,000, maybe more than that, of unhappy people in Manchester, England, that assembled up at a place which is called St. Peter's Field. And the army clashed with them. Lives were taken with that in what we refer to as Peterloo. All right, so let's move on into today's lecture here, folks. A lot of ground to cover. I'm going to teach you a little German later in the class period, and that's kind of fun, so that'll give us a little bit of something to lighten up with in the middle of the lecture anyway. So let's go back to my documents camera here, and let's pick it up here with revolution here. And this is liberalism now, but it also is associated with revolution. So in Russia, we also had some liberalism to take place in which a group of elite army officers would challenge the new czar. And that new czar is Nicholas I, or Nikolai. I prefer to use the word Nikolai. And this is the son of the recently departed Tsar Alexander I. Tsar Alexander I died in 1825, and he'll be followed by his son Nikolai I, 1825 to 1855. More on him at a later time here, folks. Not too much today anyway. But Nikolai was a conservative. Nicholas was a conservative. And some elite army officers, they refer to themselves as the Decembrists. That'll be one of your examination questions here. Rebelled against this. There were about 3,000 of them. And what they were demanding was that the brother of Nikolai I, the liberal brother, Constantine, to be appointed as the czar, to be selected as the czar, rather than that of Nikolai. And it ended up in a war, literally a small war, between these Decembrists and their followers, and that of the Russian army itself. Now, for the Decembrist group, they were greatly outnumbered, so they were quickly taken into control. I want to share the story with you about this. And the principal leaders of the Decembrist group were arrested and tried for treason against the country here. And the 5 principal members there were all taken to the gallows to be hanged. And when they hanged all 5 of them, the ropes broke on all 5. Now, traditionally in Russian history, whenever we have a hanging and the rope breaks, then that person is freed. But not in this case. For the 5 principal members of the Decembrists, they were strung up again with fresh ropes, and they all were killed with that. Their bodies were taken across the Neva River, supposedly anyway, over to where Peter and Paul Fortress is. I'll show you a photograph of that some other period of time, and another lecture here, folks, and buried in unmarked graves. Today, if you go to Peter and Paul Fortress, you'll find no mention, no markers or anything of those 5 Decembrists. The other members of the Decembrists, which were not the principal leaders, were all exiled to Siberia. All right, so let's go back to our camera here and identify some of the other attempts here at liberalism very quickly here, folks. We had liberals that were present in Belgium trying to gain more influence for the liberals in Belgium, and they were successful. And this would take place in the early 1830s, in which Belgium would gain its independence from the Netherlands. All right, sometimes liberals come out victorious, and sometimes they are not successful. In Poland, liberals also staged a revolution against the Russian presence that was present there. And for the Russians, under Nikolai I, they came in and crushed that revolution. Sometimes liberals are successful, and sometimes not. Let's move on. In Spain, liberal revolution took place here in the Carlist Wars. Carlist Wars took place in 1834. 1840, the liberals were led by Don Carlos. Hence we get the name of Carlist Wars. They were somewhat successful with this. Shall we move right along here? Reform also would take place in England, not in the form of a revolution here. We saw the revolution at St. Peter's Field, but in England there were unhappy people. We had high unemployment to take place at this period of time here, and it was just not a very wholesome, good period of time. England, with its high unemployment, had attempted originally to provide relief efforts. This would be like welfare to unemployed workers here, and the money ran out, and so what England resorted to doing was establishing what was called workhouses, and work conditions there were very harsh. So if you were unemployed, you went to a workhouse. You were paid a minimal amount of money there for your labors, and the idea behind this was actually to punish the unemployed. It was felt that there were enough jobs that were available here. It may not be the job that you like, but there were enough jobs that were available in England that if work conditions were so harsh in a workhouse, then you would take any job that was presented to you, or any job that you could find with that. England also has some reform and repeal of the Corn Laws. I'm not going to spend much time on that here, folks. But what this was, food prices were expensive in England, and England had placed high tariffs on imported foods, imported grains, and so nonetheless here in 1846 they had the repeal of this law, which were called the Corn Laws there, that would allow for cheaper food here. Another thing that will take place here, and I'm not going to spend much time on this, this is rather boring material here, folks. I've learned through giving this lecture that people are not really interested in the Chartist movement, but a organization, let me keep that back up here, but a group of people came together here in England around the period of time of 1846, and they made 6 demands upon the government, and actually over 1 million people signed this petition here to enact this. But it was such things as universal male suffrage, secret ballots here, the abolition of property requirements, for you to be a member of the House of Commons here. But anyway, these individuals were referred to as the Chartists. All right, so let's go back to France for a second here as we move around through these areas of revolution. And in France, riots would take place in 1848, particularly in places like Lyon, particularly in Paris. This was primarily due to 65% unemployment in the construction industry, 50% unemployment in the textile industry. And sure enough, what's going to take place here in 1848, just like we had in 1830, barricades will be erected in the streets of Paris. The police will be called. Riots will take place. The police and army will be called out, but they did not side with that of the king. And in fact, they were more leaning in favor there of the protesters. And sure enough, after 3 days of rioting here, King Louis Philippe abdicated in 1848. So if I should ask you in the future, what did King Charles X and Louis Philippe have in common? They both abdicated here, folks. They both quit. All right, so let's see what's going to take place in France. France will hold new elections. These new elections, which will be held here in 1848, and sure enough, a person is chosen as president. All right, and president of France. So I would ask you folks at this time, if we were face to face, and some of you will be face to face with me, what name is synonymous with greatness in France? I mean, what name in recent history would you, as a French voting male, females don't vote, would you be excited about and having as a leader of France? And I hope you good folks would tell me Napoleon. And that's exactly what's going to happen here. And a person will be elected as president of France, and that individual's name is Louis Napoleon Bonaparte. Louis Napoleon Bonaparte. He was a nephew of Napoleon I. Louis Napoleon Bonaparte. He had been in exile for most of his life, but after the revolution in 1830, he had actually returned to France. So when the elections were held, this name associated with greatness in France, Napoleon, and he is elected here. And for Napoleon, he tried to burn, and did successfully burn the candle at both ends here, folks. He courted the working class, he courted the middle class here, so he worked to appease both of those groups here. All right, he will serve as the leader of France from 1848 until 1871. All right, let's see what else I put here for you, good folks here. He would declare himself as temporary dictator. Later, he would be elected as dictator in 1842, and Napoleon will create the Second Empire. The First Empire for France was created during the French Revolution, and now Napoleon will create the Second Empire. It will last from 1848 until 1852, and more on Napoleon here. By 1852, Napoleon declared himself as an emperor, and he took the title here as Napoleon III. All right, so we had Napoleon I, and we had Napoleon III, and you might be asking what happened to Napoleon II. That was actually the son of Napoleon I and his second wife, Maria Louisa, I mean to say there, and this young man was designated as Napoleon II, but he never ruled, and he died at the age of 21. All right, so I will show you a likeness here of Napoleon II. Let me try to get it positioned right here. I meant to say Napoleon III. Here he is right here, and you can see his lovely wife there. The name is pronounced Eugenia. It looks like it's Eugenia, but it's Eugenia. All right, so Napoleon III and Eugenia. Okay, so let's move on here, folks, for Napoleon III. And for Napoleon III, like I said earlier, courted the workers. He gave them the right to strike. He gave them free medical care. I wonder if they called that Bonaparte care. I'm sorry, that wasn't very funny whatsoever. But Napoleon reconstructed Paris. He enhanced the appearance of Paris. When you look at Paris today, and you see like the very broad avenues of the Champs-Élysées, that's where the Tour de France ends its final segment. You can owe that to Napoleon III. He lived in an area of the Tuileries. Today, if you visit the Louvre Museum, part of the tour that goes through the Louvre Museum, Louvre, will actually carry you through the apartment sections there for Napoleon and Eugenia. All right here. So we also engaged in war with Russia, with Italy, with Prussia, and of all nations, engaged in war with Mexico. If you do a little studying on Mexican history, military history, you'll find that to be kind of amusing with that too. Anyway, so I almost launched into a subject there that was apart from what we need to be on, so we'll regain our focus here. Okay, now, my friends, I'm going to change topics entirely, and we're going to go into a different section here. And so pay attention with me right here. This is not the most interesting material, but it has a lot to do with events that are taking place in our country, the United States of America, even as I'm speaking right now. Now, we all know what capitalism is. Capitalism, in my estimation, is a good form of government. I'm fully in favor of capitalism. I'm a capitalist myself, and in the 19th century, capitalism expanded. And many people, however, during this period of time, felt like capitalism was not the proper avenue to take. And many people of this time felt like that another approach better than capitalism was that of socialism. And when we talk about socialism, I also mentioned too, let me get my hand out of the way there, socialism and communism. But let's get together with two words here, and I want you to memorize these two words. And I'm going to pronounce it for you first of all, and then I'm going to explain what it is. And this first word is pronounced as bourgeoisie. Bourgeoisie. Now that is a word that is plural. It indicates middle class. Middle class. So if you are a single member of the middle class, you're a part of the bourgeois. the bourgeois. You are a bourgeoisie. This is the middle class. And then we have the working class. And a working class individual is a part of the proletariat. If you are a member of the proletariat, you're a proletarian. Proletarian. All right, once again, let's go through this so that you understand this. If you're a working class individual, like most of us are, we are part of the proletariat. If we are of the middle class, not the aristocracy, but of the middle class, then we are the bourgeoisie. Everybody have that? Let's get it down, make sure we have it. Okay, so in 1845, there was a man, this man so closely identified with that of socialism. And this person is a German. He's from an area which is called the Rhineland. The individual's name is Friedrich Engels. He's German. Let me go back to my camera here for just a second here, folks. And I want to show you where the Rhineland is in Germany. This is Germany here. This is France that is present here. The Rhine River runs right through here. This is the Rhine River. So if you live in this area here, you're from the Rhineland. And that's where Friedrich Engels was from. And I don't have a likeness there of Friedrich Engels at this second here, folks. But Friedrich Engels was the son of a textile manufacturer. So he was associated with textiles. And in 1845, Friedrich Engels went to England, and actually went to Manchester, England. It seems like everything happens in this dull area of England, of Manchester. But he observed the misery of the working class in the textile industry there. And he wrote this piece, which was called The Condition of the Working Class in England, which described the misery of those workers that were present there. All right, now closely associated with Friedrich Engels is another individual, and this person's name is Karl Marx. I don't have to go back to my map of Germany again to show you where the Rhineland is, because it's roughly in the same area where Friedrich Engels was. And Karl Marx, I'll show you a likeness here of Karl Marx, and this is a most unusual photograph here, folks, because Karl Marx is actually smiling. And let me get my microphone out of the way so I can slide my textbook under. I tried to get the textbook page to fold, and it would not do so. There, okay. So you can see a likeness there of a kind of smiling Karl Marx, and that is just a so unusual photograph for him. And Karl Marx was from a middle class. He was from the bourgeois class here in Germany itself. So let me write his name out for you again right here. He was the editor of a socialist newspaper, communist newspaper, which was known as the Rheinische Zeitung. The Rheinische Zeitung. And I'll go back to myself here for a second here, folks. Take your eyes off of the slide right there. And I don't like to tell you too many personal stories here, folks, but I was present a few years ago and present in Cologne, Germany. Cologne, Germany is the way I would pronounce it anyway. We pronounce it in English as Cologne. Very beautiful city. It was almost totally destroyed by the Allies in World War II. And I'll tell you that when I was in college, I took a couple of courses in German. And so I'm not fluent in German by any means, but I can read it a little bit anyway. And a couple of years ago, I was walking through the city of Cologne, Germany, and it was near Christmas. It was right in the Christmas season itself, and very cold temperatures there. And I was walking down the street, and I saw a historical marker, and I stopped and was looking at this shop, and the historical marker was right on the side of the building, and I was reading it in German, and it said that this was the publishing place for the Rheinische Zeitung under Karl Marx. And I thought, holy moly, this is so amazing. Here I'm standing right here, at the publication site here for Karl Marx communist newspaper. And you probably don't appreciate my enthusiasm on that, but I thought that was really, really neat there. So anyway, let's go back here, folks, to our camera, and let me continue with Karl Marx. And I need to go to my next slide here. And Karl Marx had been to a number of places, been educated for a time anyway at the University of Berlin. He'd been present in Paris, present in Brussels. He'd been exiled out of many of those places there because of his communist beliefs. And Karl Marx established the Communist League. And under the Communist League, the goal was to overthrow the bourgeoisie, to overthrow the middle class itself. Well, a couple of years after this, Marx and Engels issued the Communist Manifesto. The Communist Manifesto. And let me share with you some of the ideas behind this. Society is no more than a reflection of the hierarchy of classes dictated by those who own the means of production and control the distribution of goods. Or in other words, what Marx and Engels are saying here is society is controlled by big business. Well, I happen to think that is the truth. I agree with that, as a matter of fact. All right, and what Marx and Engels were saying is that history had existed in three stages. And think about this from last semester. We had master and slave, then we went to lord and serf, then we went to bourgeois and the proletarian. Those are the three stages in history, and we'll continue with this. Feudalism and manorialism disappeared under capitalism. Capitalism will disappear under socialism. All right, so that is a part of this in the Communist Manifesto. And they had a saying here, and I would give it to you in German, but you wouldn't be able to understand me here, folks. Workers of the world, unite. Workers of the world, unite. And a few years after this, Marx produced Das Kapital. Das Kapital. Now, I wrote it in German for you. I also wrote it in English. Das Kapital, which is the capital. The capital here. And under this, Marx argued, that capitalist workers are denied your fair share of the profits. Workers are paid less than the value of your goods that you produce, and these profits are pocketed by the bourgeois capitalist owner here. And Marx predicted that capitalism would defeat itself. The proletarian would rise up against the bourgeois, the working class would rise up against the middle class here, and what they were demanding was payment in advance for work produced, that ownership and operation of the state, the owner and operation of the business be conducted by the state. The state, in other words, will control all production of goods. Socialism will be replaced by communism. There will be the elimination of private property ownership, and we will all become one people. We will become a classless society. And that's what communism is all about here, class, whether you realize it or not. I lived during a time in which we had many communist nations here, and we still have some today. We had communist China, Cuba is communist. We had all of the Balkans area, and that area controlled by the Soviet Union were communist. Russia, a part of the Soviet Union, was communist. We all become one people. It is a classless society. And many people mistakenly believe that if you're under a socialist state, you're under a communist state, that you don't have to work. That we take the wealth of the wealthy, take the money of the wealthy, and we support those individuals under socialism and bring them up to where we are all the same. There has never been a success story in socialism, never a success story in communism here, folks. It sounds good. People want the free stuff, but it is not good. I don't know if you've ever been to a communist nation, and I'm betting that you have not been to a communist nation, and I have. I've been to communist China, I've been to Russia, which is capitalistic today, but it's not very much capitalistic. It still has the dregs of socialism and communism that are present there. I've been to Yugoslavia, which was communist. I've been to Cuba on a couple of occasions, which is communist. And my friends, it is not the best situation. It is abject poverty for the common individual there. So I challenge you on this, folks. Socialism is not an acceptable way. All right, so let's go back before I talk too much about this, get off on my soapbox with that. All right, so some of the best known of the socialists of that time, the German socialist Ferdinand Lassalle. I want to go to my next page and give you a chance to write the name if you want. Anyway, we also had another socialist here who was from Russia, Mikhail Bakunin. And both of these individuals, Lassalle and Bakunin, believe that the opposition, that terrorism should take place in an attempt to overthrow the government. Do we see that happening in the United States today here, folks? We do have an element out there. I identify them with the socialist movement here in our country today, which are trying literally to generate protests and generate an overthrow of the present government that we have today. Anyway, All right. So anyway, let's move on with this, folks. Socialism was present in Germany. We had the German Socialist Democratic Party. We will talk about them again more by the time we get up to the times here of Adolf Hitler. We had the Italian Socialist Party. I did not write that down. The Belgian Socialist Party. The French Socialist Party. England had no recognized Socialist Party, but England had many, many socialists that were present there. And some of these individuals that you probably are familiar with. George Bernard Shaw, Sidney Webb, Beatrice Webb, H.G. Wells, War of the World. Those were all socialists. Socialist Party in the United States was a big, big movement here, my friends. As we're speaking now in this Western Civilization class, I've been preparing lectures on socialism for my U.S. history class, and we will find here that socialism from 1900 to 1932, that the Socialist Party was present in the United States, and that socialists ran candidates in 8 of 9 of those presidential elections, particularly with that of Eugene V. Debs, a socialist who ran for president on the Socialist Party ticket in 1900, 1904, 1908, 1912, and 1920. And the last time in 1920, he was in a federal penitentiary, earned 6% of the popular votes, and garnered almost 1 million votes here, folks, running on the campaign slogan of Vote for Convict number 9653, Eugene V. Debs. All right, can you imagine that, if you will? So socialism was a big movement in the United States here from 1900 until 1932, and it has unfortunately made a return here, folks, in recent presidential elections here. It is not the path to take, I promise you, good folks. Okay, so anyway, let's move on with this here, folks. Okay, now some socialists, particularly in England, believed that socialism was only in the interest of males, and they were opposed to this. Now, these individuals were recognized by the title here of pure socialists, and we also had another group which were revisionists, and these revisionists that were demanding that women be given more attention, more rights be provided for them, and promised to them by these socialists. These were the revisionists. Some individuals in England took the idea of Fabian socialism, the idea of the inevitability of gradualism, that if we just leave capitalism alone here, folks, capitalism will gradually just evolve into socialism. And I somewhat see that taking place in the United States of America today. All right, now one group of workers believe that, one group of the proletariat believe that the government, the state, should not control big business, that the workers actually should control big business. Or in other words, what I'm trying to say here, if we have the coal industry, we have the steel industry, the textile industry, it should be controlled by the workers themselves. And this is referred to as syndicalism. Or in other words, the business is controlled by the workers, it's controlled by the syndicate. All right, and it had a little bit of popularity for a period of time. All right, now during this period here, and I believe this firmly here, folks, it's not just Alan Rowland going out on a limb with this, but often we find that with socialism, we find it associated with violence. We find it associated with labor unrest, with riots, if you will, here. And I'm going to try to prove to you that that has a modicum of truth with this, too. In the United States, we had the Haymarket Square massacre that took place. It was a strike that took place in 1886. The Homestead Steel Strike in 1892. The Pullman Strike in the United States in 1894, the Trafalgar Square riots that took place in 1887 in London. All of this associated with socialism here. Very often we find socialism associated with assassinations of individuals. King Umberto in 1900 in Italy was assassinated. The President Sardy Carnot of France was assassinated in 1894. In 1881, James A. Garfield, President of the United States, was assassinated by Charles Guiteau. In 1901, President of the United States, William McKinley, was assassinated by an anarchist by the name of Leon Czolgosz. So anyway, I'm trying to prove my point to you good folks here that we do have some violence associated with socialism. Okay, so let me change my slide here, folks, and shall we move right along here. All right, I want to go into a different section, this kind of interesting section in a way here, folks. And what I want to associate this with is what is called nationalism. So let me give you some words here. Nationalism is a sentiment. Nationalism is a sense of belonging. Now, if we take that sentiment, if we take that emotion, and we move it into action, then we create nations, or in other words, nation building. So, nationalism, this is an emotion. If we put it into action, then this is nation building here. Now, where the word comes from, it comes from a Latin word, nasi. Now, nasi means to be born. To be born. And I'm going to go back to myself here, folks. And again, it seems like I'm preaching to you today, and I do not intend to do that. But I would ask you, if you were in class with me, are you proud to be an American? Are you proud to be an American? And I would take out a flag of the United States of America, and I would ask, is anybody in this room brave enough to take this flag of the United States of America, which is on a little flagstaff here, and walk that flag, parade that flag across the campus here of Bevel State? Would any of you be proud enough to do that here? And I would find that most of you members of my class would not. There would be a couple. I've done this exercise on a number of occasions here. And a handful of students in my class are proud Americans that they would actually do this, you know. Would you take a flag of the United States of America that was on your T-shirt, and you have a T-shirt, and this T-shirt has a flag, has the imprinted flag of the United States of America, or maybe USA on it, and would you go down to Warehouse 319? You know, would you do that? And some of you might, and some of you might not. Now, I cannot see you from where I am right now, but I'll just about guarantee, those of you that are watching this lecture, some of you have Auburn T-shirts on. Some of you have Alabama paraphernalia on. And I would say to you, are you proud of the University of Alabama? Are you proud of Auburn University? Are you proud of their football program? There. And the point I would be trying to make here, you know, we will eagerly identify with the Atlanta Braves or the Atlanta Falcons or Chicago Bears or Roll Tide or War Eagle. We'll easily identify with them, but are you proud to be an American? And the point I'm trying to make here, folks, is that in America, we're not very nationalistic. Unfortunately, we are not very nationalistic. The only time I've seen us in recent history, anyway, to be nationalistic was in 1990 when we had our first, 1991, when we had our first Persian Gulf victory there. And people were quite nationalistic, but we're not today here. You know, we're not proud to be Americans. We burn the American flag. We trample the American flag. I think I'm beating this to death here, folks, so let's go back to my camera here. All right, so anyway, Nazi, to be born. Okay, now often we find this associated with what is referred to as Romanticism. Okay, so we're going to move away from the Enlightenment here, Romanticism, which will be kind of a substitute or replacement here for the Enlightenment movement. And for Romanticism, we can find this associated with art, with literature, with music. And what Romanticism does, it evokes emotion. It evokes individualism, imagination. It evokes freedom here. All right, so I'll tell you what, let's take a little break right here, and I want to make good German-speaking people of you. All right, so we're going to spend a little bit of time with this, and you're not responsible for this. I'm not going to hold you, test you on this by any means, but this is going to give you an idea of how we pronounce some German words. Now, if you ever see a word in German that starts with a J, this word is pronounced like Y. All right, J-Y. Let me give you an example here. The German word for yes, okay, I wrote it down here for you folks. The German word here for yes is this word right here. So how do you pronounce it? How do you pronounce it? The way you do not pronounce it is ja. The way you do pronounce it is ja. Okay? All right, so that's simple enough with that. Now, if we see a German word that starts with V, it is pronounced as F sound. V, F. V is pronounced as F sound. If we see a German word that starts with a W, W is pronounced as V. Okay, great. And if we have a word that ends in E, in English, if a word ends in E, we keep it silent. Yeah, we keep it silent. But in German, if a word ends in E, it is pronounced E, or All right. CH can be pronounced as like ich, or ich. Okay. If we find in German and you see this very, very often, if we have I and E, or if we have E and I in a word. It's always pronounced as the last vowel. All right, if we look at this one here, this word right here, this word which is present here, that word is pronounced vine, vine. If we have this word here, this word is pronounced vin, vin. All right, two entirely different words, but similar in their spelling here. You need to recognize this. If you're in Germany, I guess you might need to recognize this. If we pronounce this word as vine, I'm talking about wine. That is wine, the substance that you drink. Wine. Germany has some of the best tasting wines you'll find in the world here, folks. I lived in an area which was called Weinsberg. Weinsberg, that's Wine Mountain. Wine Mountain. Lived there for 2 years. If you look at this word here, is Wien, Wien, this is Vienna. This is a city in Austria which is pronounced Vienna. So you can imagine, if you go to Vienna and you go to Wien and you drink some wine. All right, you kind of get the idea of what I'm talking about. Okay, so here's some German words, typical German words. All right, to say please. Please. Now use your pronunciation guide that I gave you a second ago. Remember, E's are always pronounced, so it is bitte. Bitte, that is please. If we said it in English, it would be bit, which is nonsensical. It makes no sense. If we have the German word here for thank you. Thank you means thank you. Danke, danke. You look at it like thank you, danke, danke. All right. And that's what you would do to be polite. You would say danke if somebody brings you something. The German word for good morning. All right. Henceforth, if you see me in class, when I walk into the classroom, I want you to tell me Guten Morgen. Guten Morgen. That means good morning. Good morning. Now, when you depart class, we say goodbye. Goodbye. So here's how you say it in German. Auf Wiedersehen. Auf Wiedersehen. Auf Wiedersehen. It means like again, see you. See you again. See you again. The German word for no, can you pronounce this properly? The German word for no? Nein. Nein. All right, and that's really, really interesting there, folks. Now, I lived in an area of Germany which was called Baden-Württemberg. I lived there for 2 years. Baden-Württemberg, it's down in the southern parts of Germany. The German I learned was Hochdeutsch, which was High German, and the German that's spoken down in this region here is a southern German. It's like a southern dialect here, folks. So often Germans had a difficult time understanding me with my northern accent, so to speak. All right, but when you get into a German store, look at the words here now. Look at these two words right here. But when you would go into a German Gasthaus, and a Gasthaus would be like a pub, and it was a very religious area in which I lived. The second that you would walk into an establishment, the people inside the Gasthaus or Gasthof there would all, as soon as I walked in, they would all say, "Grüß Gott, Grüß Gott." And at first, I didn't know what they were saying to me, and I would not respond. And when I would not respond, I would not get any service. The waitress would not come over to my table. Nobody would speak to me any further there. And then I finally realized what these individuals are saying to me. Christ gut is Christ is good. Christ is good. All right. And I was ignoring them, and so they took offense at that. So I learned very quickly that when you went into a German establishment, when the patrons that were there would say Christ gut, I would always respond, Christ gut, and they would say, Christ gut, and I would get the hostess to come over to my table, and everything would just be fine. Okay, that's your German lesson for today here, folks, but let's move on here. All right, so I want to talk to you a little bit about some of these romanicists from this period, and let me go back to my camera here, and let's find where we were here, folks. And one of the romanicists, and he was a musician, and it was this individual. I'm going to let you pronounce the name. Here's a likeness of this individual. He's present right up here. All right, can you pronounce his name? And if you can there, you probably should pronounce it properly as Ludwig von, remember the F pronunciation, Beethoven. Ludwig von Beethoven. Ludwig von Beethoven. All right. So anyway, you kind of get the idea with that. Now, another individual, a fabulous writer, fabulous thinker of this time, and I know if you take some of the English professors' courses here at Bevel, you'll study about Goethe. All right. So here's a way to properly pronounce his name: Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. All right. Work on your pronunciation. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. And he wrote this piece, which is called The Sorrows of Poor Werther. And he also wrote this piece, which he completed right before his death, by the way, Faust, in which an individual sells his soul to the devil for eternal knowledge. All right, so work on your pronunciation here. Okay, let's move on with some of the other philosophers of this period of time here in Romanticism. Johann von Herder. Now, in German, very often you make the H sound silent. So, Johann von Herder. And he wrote or actually what he believed here in Von Herder believed civilization is not a part of an artificial international elite. Civilization is part of die Volk. Civilization is part of die Volk. Now, if you translate this word folk, folk means people. Folk means people. Civilization is not a part of an artificial international elite. Civilization is a part of the people. It is a part of the folk. When I went to Germany, and I'd graduated from the University of Alabama. I was in the Army at that time, and I sent to Germany. I didn't have transportation. I had to leave my car behind at home. In fact, I gave my car away. And so when I got to Germany, I bought a car. And actually, my mother gave me $2,000. She really did. My mother gave me $2,000, and that was all the money I had in my life here, folks. And that money was transferred over to a German bank, and I went down to the German bank, and I checked all my money out, as a matter of fact, and that $2,000 was converted into Deutschmarks, and so I had 8,000 Deutschmarks. That's all I had to my name, and I had it in a paper bag, and not even a Walmart bag. It was a paper bag. It was about this thick, such as that, and had it rolled up at the top, and I was scared to death. I had to walk from my army barracks and walk the 2 miles down into the city of Heilbronn there, and I went to a German car dealer carrying all this money I had in my life. I was scared to death that I was going to be mugged, and then I would be penniless there, and I went down and I bought a car. And you know what? And I paid cash for it there too. And I bought that car for $2,000, and brand new car, and that type of car, you've already guessed it here, folks. That car was a Volkswagen. So if we put that into translation here, folks, and I did not write this out for you folks, but if we translate that car was a people's car. It was a people's wagon, the Volkswagen. So if you drive a Volkswagen or you see one of those today here, folks, that's the people's car. All right, another individual here. And I like this individual very, very much. He doesn't look very pleasing here. We can see him over here. He was a professor at the University of Berlin, professor there at the University of Berlin. If you go to Berlin today, this is an old institution. You won't even recognize it as a college, by the way. But his name, work on your pronunciation, is George. See, if we had an E on the end of George, it would be like Georgia. So it's George Wilhelm Hegel. George Wilhelm Hegel. All right, now listen to his philosophy here. Social and political institutions are born, they grow to maturity, they satisfy their purposes, and they are replaced by others. I love that. Social and political institutions are born, they grow to maturities, they satisfy their purposes, and they're replaced by others. So you think about this, folks. Absolutism. It served its purpose. It grew, it matured, it satisfied its purpose, and it was replaced by others. Here, Manorialism. It was born, it grew to maturity, it satisfied its purpose, it was replaced by something else. Here, we have capitalism. It grows, it matures, it satisfies its purpose, and it will be replaced by something else. History has shown that always takes place. I'm not ready for capitalism to leave here. But, according to Hegel, we may be in line for a new change here with a new political system here. As we have seen, socialism and communism did develop, but they were replaced. And right now, in most of those countries anyway, where they were replaced by capitalism. Couldn't we say the same thing about our own personal relationships with members of the opposite sex, or maybe even members with the same sex? We develop a relationship, it matures, it serves its purpose, and it's replaced by something else. Maybe I'm reading too deeply into that, folks. All right, back we go here. Okay, so let's see who else we have here. Another individual, Johann G. Fichte. Fichte. He believed, unlike that of von Herder, that civilization is not a part of an artificial international elite, but civilization is the spirit of the whole people. It's all of the people, all of us working together. The Volksgeist, the Volksgeist. If you ever see this word here, Geist, Geist means like movement, like poltergeist, it's like people moving. But in this case here, we literally translate the word Volksgeist. It is the people's movement. All right, now also here, and let's spend a few minutes here going through some of these literary individuals here. I'm not going to hold you responsible for these individuals. This will be just like an English course here. But we have the Brothers Grimm, Grimm's Fairy Tale. You're probably familiar with that. Grimm's Fairy Tales here. Jakob and Wilhelm Grimm. All right, these were Germans, by the way, and they wrote a series of these fairy tales. Little Red Riding Hood, Kleines Rotkäppchen would be it in German. Snow White, Schneewittchen would be in German. Rumpelstiltskin, Cinderella, Tom Thumb, Sleeping Beauty, Hansel and Gretel, Rapunzel. We're probably all familiar with those. I bet that you are anyway. Some of the other individuals. Friedrich Schiller. Today, if you go to Vienna, Austria, right there next to the art museum, which Adolf Hitler tried to gain attendance to, you can find a huge monument there to Friedrich Schiller. And he wrote this story here called Wilhelm Tell. And there actually was a William Tell. William Tell was from Switzerland, by the way. And you can go there. Whether he actually shot the apple off the top of his son's head, I do not know if that's true or not. An Italian musician by the name of Gioacchino Rossini, and he put this to music, the William Tell Overture. Some of the other individuals of this period. William Wordsworth. You're probably familiar with lyrical ballads. Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Did I write his name down for you? I did. Samuel Taylor Coleridge. The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Kubla Khan. Cristobal. Maybe you're familiar with those individuals here. Sir Walter Scott, Ivanhoe, about the history of Scotland. Other individuals here. William Blake here. George Gordon, Lord Byron. You may be familiar with him here. I'm going to skip, we'll go down here to John Keats. John Keats with The Rape of the Lock. It makes my head hurt to go back all those many years to when I was taking English literature here. And John Keats, who died at a rather young age and died in Rome, as a matter of fact. If you get a chance to go to the Spanish Steps in Rome, you'll find the apartment complex where John Keats lived in is right adjacent to that. And a dear friend of his, Percy Bysshe Shelley, who actually died in a boating accident. He was on a boat which was called Don Juan, and the boat sank. And when they dredged his poor body up here, folks, he had a copy of Keats' poems in his pocket here. And married to Percy Bysshe Shelley was Mary Shelley. And Mary Shelley, of course, which wrote Frankenstein. You're probably familiar with that. Anyway. All right, so anyway, some amazing writers. Some interesting artists from this period here. Eugène Delacroix, that's where we had Liberty Leading the People, happened to be one of his best known ones. The Massacre of Chios happened to be another. Francisco Goya, you may be familiar with his art, pieces of art here, works of art, The Execution of the Rebels. And some of the musicians that we have of that period of time here, we have Giuseppe Verdi, and let's see if I have a likeness here, Giuseppe Verdi. There he is right here, Giuseppe Verdi. And I do not have a likeness here of this next musician. All right, but I do want you to pronounce this, folks. He's a popular musician. He wrote this piece, which is called, in many pieces, which is called The Song of the Nibelungs. All right, but I hear so many people mispronounce this here, folks. They pronounce the name in English. They describe it as Richard Wagner. And let's not pronounce it that way. Look at my pronunciation here. Listen to my pronunciation here. And let's pronounce it as Richard Wagner. Okay? Everybody got that? Richard Wagner. All right here, folks. All right, that concludes our section here on Romanticism here and nationalism. We're not quite through with this section here on revolution because we will continue continue to address that here, folks. So anyway, now's a good stopping place for us here, folks. I've been at it almost for 50 minutes, and I know you're tired of listening to me and certainly tired of looking at me here. Okay, stay up with your material here, folks. You also have a little quiz to take care of. So anyway, I'll see you next time.